Thank you, everybody, for jumping on board. Welcome to the May 2021 edition of the Cerini Nonprofit Connection. We're constantly looking to bring in guests that can help elevate the nonprofit sector and help organizations excel. With so many nonprofits forced to operate in the digital space for communication, funding, branding, and more, organizations have been struggling to figure out what really is the best way to get their message out there, and more importantly, to be seen and reacted to. Today, we have with us a special guest, Michael Bellavia from HelpGood, a marketing agency that looks to help their clients inspire actions with their story. Welcome, Michael, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
If anybody has questions as we're going through this, feel free to post them to the Q&A. This way we can find them and we'll make sure that those questions get answered. So Michael, before we get started, HelpGood touts itself as a social impact marketing agency with a digital first approach. How do you go about doing this with your nonprofit clients?
So we offer a full service to our clients, and that really can be across multiple platforms, but partly it's a mix of our own DNA as an agency of how we evolved, really starting off in the social media lane and then expanding from there over a decade ago. And then also it's just the nature of nonprofits that we see that, we saw this even a decade ago when we started working with them, but it's only become even more so an issue that you almost have to become your own content production studio. Like everybody's an entertainment studio to an extent now. Like you all have to be constantly churning out information about who you are, what you do. And that is all for the purposes of bubbling up in organic search or being able to continue to be parts of conversations of actively happening events that you need to be part of and that are relevant to your organization. So for us, it really starts with kind of working with clients from a research standpoint. Sometimes that is a full bore kind of like surveys that we're doing at a broad-based level, but other times it could be just through interviews with your constituents, with stakeholders, with peer organizations even. And then prioritizing from there what you have a bandwidth internally to do, as well as a budget in order to do. And the biggest reason why we take this digital first approach is that with most of the nonprofits that we're working with, they're not on the micro startup end of the spectrum, but they don't have enormous budgets that they're working with. We have worked with United Way in the past, but most of them are not of that scale. And so really digital gives them the opportunity to really connect with their audience unlike any other platform out there. It's not like you can slap up a billboard and then really have a conversation through that. So digital really gives you that ability to start conversations, also then kind of pivot quickly if something's not working. Same thing, if a billboard's up and then all of a sudden there's a drive towards social equity, it's not like you can easily change that billboard and that's your only kind of marketing outlet and advertising outlet that you have.
When you talk about the social impact of your organization, I know social impact is kind of a buzzword in the nonprofit sector too. How does that translate in terms of working with the sector?
So for us, it's really focusing on what is it that the end result of what you're looking to do. So one of the longest clients that we've worked with is the Smokey Bear campaign. That's literally our first client, and we're still over 12 years later working on that, and we run the social media for Smokey Bear. So if you're talking to Smokey, you're talking to us, basically. With that, the ultimate goal is to reduce the number and the intensity of human-caused wildfires. And so that is one metric. There are lots of different contributors that kind of go along with that, and that's the social impact metric that ultimately we want to drive towards. But then we're also using proxy metrics along the way to really kind of gauge the work that we're doing. So that could be everything measured in terms of the number of impressions, channel growth, engagement that we're getting, comments, shares, all of that are as proxies for that. But we're really trying to get there. The social impact is behavioral change, getting people to be less sloppy with fire when they're going out into the wilderness or even out into their urban environment, and making sure that they're conscious of what they're doing. In other cases, it could be anything from that, like we worked with LA County in the past year. Before COVID, it was the #1 priority issue around homelessness. So really kind of figuring out the social impact there is helping people find pathways to finding a home in some regard. And then also helping county residents see how they can be a part of that solution. What are the components that they can do? What can they learn of what the county's doing? So really that social impact metric can change, and it always does change based on what that client is, what their mission is. For ourselves as an organization, we even have, we're in the process, it's been a while and it's still going on, but we're in the midst of getting a B Corp certification. And
Mhm.
that you actually have to kind of be very transparent about what your impact goals are. So that could be everything around from like your own green footprint, your energy conservation for for our agency, to how are you staffing and how are you sourcing vendors from your local community, to do you have like a written a policy around certain practices that show that you are driving towards equity and helping to advance the common good. So by nature for our agency, all of our clients are only nonprofits, foundations, social responsibility teams inside of for-profit companies. So by its very nature, like we're focused on social impact only exclusively.
So when you work with a client, the first thing you try to do is try to understand what they're uh, trying to get out of this, what their social impact deliverable is, and then you kind of build your campaign around that so that you got the branding around that social impact. Is that what you
I
try
mean,
to do?
that's the lens that we take with all of this. And it really comes down to it. And it's always like something that we return back to, like even when we're coming in with clients, often we're working with clients that have been around for a while. And so in some cases, they may have had a program that evolved because of a grant. And they were able to build that up, and it's a constant stream of revenue for them via the grant that they continue to get that. But then it also, if you take a step back and see, does this fit into the social impact overarching umbrella of what you're trying to do? And then if you're doing this grant for this subsection of your audience, should you really be looking at how do you provide the same kinds of services to other audiences that you say are part of your impact plan, but that you're not fully servicing? So really we use that not just from an operational standpoint of where you should be putting the focus, but then also from a marketing standpoint, really looking at, well, if you're saying that you are supporting veterans, are you really supporting all veterans, or is it a particular segment of those veterans? Because then if you're not talking to all the different kind of subcomponents within that veterans community, then you really need to start looking at what do you need to do operationally as well as marketing wise in order to reach all of those different segments.
So this is kind of a marketing that kind of pushes back into organization's mission and in terms of trying to make sure that everything is coupled together and making sure that the organization's activities kind of match the marketing, match the mission, match the operations so that it becomes a holistic approach.
You're hired. So basically, yes, I mean, that's the gist of it, is that you want to make sure that like marketing, even for a nonprofit, really is kind of salesy in a way. You're selling yourself, you're telling your story, you're trying to get people to either support your cause, provide money to you, donate to you, volunteer, take some action on your behalf. But the only reason why people do things for anybody is because they believe you're authentic, they can trust you, that you are going to walk the walk. And so marketing, whenever we're getting involved, we fashion ourselves as this marketing communications agency, but we do kind of get dirty with their mission. We do get our hands dirty with their operations. We look at what their fundraising apparatus looks like. We look at what their impact has been in terms of if they're saying what they're going to do for a particular community, are they really delivering on it? Because otherwise, what are we selling then? Vaporware? There are some nonprofits out there that do seem like that, but that's not the ones that we want to work with. So we do kind of challenge and push our clients to make sure that they are always moving forward, and we want them to do the same thing with us, really.
So that brings up a whole myriad of questions. So let's start with what are some of the key strategies that you're kind of implementing with your nonprofits to get their messaging heard and acted upon? You know, so again, there's so many nonprofits, there's so much noise out there. So what are you doing and how are you helping them to get there, or what should they be doing to get their voice heard above the kind of clutter of everything else that's on the online right now?
So it usually kind of boils down to, it's really, again, that mission, finding what is your lane and truly knowing yourself and what is that kind of blue ocean space, what is that white space that you can take the lead in? Because if you're not a super large one like United Way, which is all about advancing the common good in education, income, and health, these big, it's almost like a sub-governmental organization, but most nonprofits don't have that scale. So really leaning into what is your lane and what audience can you really advance kind of change for in a big dramatic way. So for that, it's really kind of going back again, knowing who you are, doing that research, that discovery process, and then thinking through based on how you prioritize it, what your goals are, knowing who the audience is that you want to go after, then seeing out what do you think you really can achieve. And it's one thing to set these big kind of hairy, audacious goals for your organization. So you have something to strive for, like ending homelessness by 2050. But if you don't have that capacity to authentically back that up and provide a path to doing that, then don't shill something that you don't got the capacity to do. Really find out what it is that you have that ability to do, what is within your reach that still is a stretch, and then really kind of forwarding that and then seeing what strategies would align with that and taking a really hard lens at it. There are, because everybody wants to aspire, their organization wants to aspire to be something bigger. They may think that they have, let's say, an international footprint. Well, or they have the capacity to potentially do international stuff, but then their footprint really is more national, or their footprint really is just in a particular county even. So I think it's like really having an honest conversation with yourself as an organization to see what you can do and what you can own, and really going full bore over that and seeing this is what we're good at. We can do this and then incrementally move from there. But then also looking for those opportunities to stretch for a brass ring in terms of what potential is out there for your organization. That could be from an operational standpoint, from a funding standpoint, going after a big grant that's out there, really kind of taking a big swing to get it, or even from a marketing standpoint, like really investing behind a campaign and just focusing all efforts on that rather than spreading yourself a little smattering everywhere. That's not gonna do it. Like, you know what, my niece says we need to be on TikTok, let's do that. And I just heard about this Clubhouse thing, let's get on that too. Or, you know what, I'm gonna get on LinkedIn too. There's just, it's not sustainable. So really it's a matter of trying to document a plan, having a focused plan, and then whenever somebody comes at you with the sidebar thing of like, hey, we should really be doing this. I saw this XYZ organization doing this, we got to be doing it too. Then you go back to your plan and say, you know what, that's not in our immediate plan now, but we can do that and put that in the on-ramp schedule for something that we might do in year 2 from now, if we hit these other benchmarks that we set for ourselves. So a lot of it is kind of having a rigorous approach to drafting your marketing strategy, to executing it, to iterating on it, optimizing it, and then taking it like incremental steps as you improve what you're doing.
You keep feeding a bunch of things that add into like 27 other questions, and I don't know which order to ask the questions in. So I'm going to ask first. I mean, you talk about developing a strategy. You talk about developing a plan and goals established in terms of the marketing approach. What are you seeing in terms of the vehicles to get organizations to where they need to go in terms of video or social media platforms or outreach or storytelling or all of those different things? I mean, where do you see or how do you determine what's the best approach for an organization to take, and what should organizations be thinking about?
So while I was saying, like I had said before, that really each of these nonprofits has to become almost like their own entertainment studio. You can churn out content all the time if you have the capacity to do it, or people to lean on to help produce it for you. And I'd say one of the big things that came out of this pandemic time is that lots of folks already became content producers, and they didn't necessarily even realize it. Like, this Zoom is now part of content that you're putting out there to talk, that kind of shows who your organization is and kind of attracts the number of people that are on this call. So the kind of level of standards that people and their expectations have been lowered a bit. So we've had clients that really amped up their video strategy during this time, and we were able to support it Even like one of the clients is the Los Angeles Christian Health Centers. They are a health center right on Skid Row in Los Angeles, serving the homeless community, indigent populations, immigrants, what have you, really underserved community. And they leaned heavily into video. And I'm not talking about lush productions. This is like they went to their staff, they went to the people, their volunteers, and they said, we want you to capture video. We did shoot some in a professional manner because they're launching a new building inside of this building, and we're gearing up to produce even more of that. But a lot of it has been just casual video that a husband of a wife who's a nurse shot, all shaky cam. As long as the audio is good, that's what really matters. But the video doesn't have to be pristine. One of the videos that they shot was while this woman was doing her laundry, talking about the work and the service that she's provided to these folks. They raised $40,000 off of this one video. That was just like, really, if you were kind of looking at it in a way, just not the best quality by any stretch visually, but it worked because it provided that immediacy, the authenticity, that kind of transparency about who these people are. You could tell from this video, this woman cared about the organization. She cared about the mission. She lived it. It was like she was awash in it. So I think with that, I think video, don't set yourself up that you need to hire big crews if you don't have a production budget. We've also worked like the Smokey Bear campaign. Those PSAs, they invest like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you don't have to do that. If your only outlet to distribution are your social channels or your email network. But you can really make hay of that stuff. You can really lean into video for producing thank you videos for anybody, anytime somebody even kind of gives you a donation or something like that, sending them off a personalized video that you're just shooting at your desk, saying thank you. That would, like, that immediate kind of personal connection would speak volumes versus like some multi-$1,000 production for a one-off campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a video perspective, the more you can kind of invite people in, the more you can show people kind of what's happening behind the scenes, the more you can give people slice of life and let them really feel and see and understand what you're doing through quick 30-second videos, 45-second videos. I think that goes a long way in terms of really engaging people and keeping people connected to your organization.
I totally agree. I don't know how many people would be watching, let's say, a live stream of the accountants at a nonprofit doing their work, let's say. So, but at the same time, I think you can lower your expectations as far as what you need to produce and how produced and scripted it needs to be. I think, especially given this upcoming generations in terms of social media and what their expectations are, and like kind of the casual nature of even what you can see on TikTok or what have you, I think any of that immediacy, the more the feeling of immediacy gives, that lends itself to the authenticity of that organization and its message. And it shows, okay, these people really, they give a crap about what they're actually talking about. They really care about this cause. I can feel that and see that. And then that also gives the shareability of whatever content that you're doing, so that you're then inspiring all these other people that are already connected to you to become mini marketers for you. And so that would be the other thing, is looking at what is the value proposition that you're offering to people that are consuming your content, because you don't want to just look at them as, hey, we just got to push out more stuff because they're consuming it. But what value are you providing to them? And how do you incentivize them to even transfer that value to others? How do you get them to even think about sharing it beyond just saying, hey, share this video with your friends? But what's in it for them to even do that? Because everybody has only a certain amount of bandwidth, and time is valuable. So it really is looking at what are some things that we can do that would continually inspire these people to help further our story and tell the story that we would like them to tell, by helping them, by lifting up their own stories as far as how they are involved with the organization as well.
Yeah, and again, some of that is trying to get maybe some of those videos to go virtual, or the more you can connect people, the more you can invite people and everything else. I think you're actually getting to a point where people feel, as I said before, more connected. I mean, there's a statistic out there that people who gave the first time contribution to an organization in 2019, only 14.2% of them gave again in 2020, because they didn't feel that connectivity to the organization So I do like your idea of that little personal video from the executive director or someone like that, throwing out there to a donor, and maybe these little videos to show the donor where their funds are going and who they're helping and how they're helping, to kind of invite them to donate again.
I Yeah, and I'm not surprised by that 14% statistic actually, because I think a lot of times the other thing is you need to have uh, kind of like the infrastructure in place, the technical infrastructure in place, that when somebody comes into your organization, like your CRM better have listed, how did they find you? Did they come through a Google ad? Did they come through an email? Were they a referral? Had they seen something? Really, you want to try to track as much as possible so that then you could segment those people. And I'm not saying you have to go down to such a granular level, but even any incremental step that you can take to figure out the database that you have, who are they? Because you don't want to take, like, if somehow, I don't know, we had a client that had, like luckily, Selena Gomez retweet one of their tweets that with a call to action about them. They got a ton of retweets off of that. They even got people coming to a website and giving their email address, but they weren't necessarily the typical audience that would be supporting this nonprofit. But then they didn't know what to do with those people because they were largely younger people. And usually their model is they would ask people to donate $100 or $200. And it's like, these young kids aren't going to have $100 of scratch to give you right away. So it really is, you want to be able to segment that population and then look at ways that maybe it's a dollar ask that you have for them, or maybe it's not even you're asking them for money. Maybe that's the audience that you use. You know what? They already shared. They already understand the concept of using social. So maybe just ask them to reshare something, and that has value to it. So part of that is really having the infrastructure in place to be able to really kind of segment the database of folks that you have, just to see, is this somebody that has donated recently? Are they a big value donor? Were they just one of these looky-loos that came in off of a one-off campaign? So you just interact with them in a different way instead of sending everybody the same kind of monthly newsletter and think, okay, I checked that box, I did it.
I mean, one of the things I think you're seeing is that the younger generation are more socially responsible, more interested in making a difference. And if you can kind of bring them into your organization at a young age, you could capture them for the long term for your organization. So I agree that you want to find some way to keep that younger generation attached to your organization. In addition, when you said, maybe this is just a one-off contribution, I know that there's a lot of people out there who are making donations to charity as almost like seed investments or seed donations, to find out what sort of impact it's having and what sort of communication that they get from the nonprofit in order to determine whether they want to make them part of their ongoing giving campaign. So you really never know. And it's kind of important, as you said, to kind of stay in the face and find a way to communicate on a regular basis in some way with these people.
Yeah, there definitely are generational differences as far as expectations go as well. I do think this younger generation is definitely more demanding in a way, that not just that, okay, this organization is, I don't know, supporting racial equity, let's say, or that it's part of their mandate that they advance equity. But then they really want to look at, well, but how come there are a bunch of white people only running this organization? What does that masthead look like? Like, to really kind of take a next step into, like, are they really walking that walk? And so, so you really have to make sure that if you're going to put yourself out there and say certain things about what you're supporting as an organization, that you're fully enmeshed in that it's fully integrated into who you are, that you are providing opportunities to people that from underserved communities, if that's what you're saying that your true mission is. So you really have to always be kind of reassessing kind of the fitness of your own organization, the fitness of your ability to really kind of stay tracked to your mission, especially to stay attuned and to connect with this newer generation of folks.
You've talked a lot about social media and social media platforms. You mentioned TikTok, you mentioned LinkedIn, you mentioned, I don't think you mentioned Instagram, but Twitter, you mentioned a bunch. There are a lot of them out there. And as you said early on, it's going to be very, very difficult for an organization to be able to maintain 27 different social media platforms. How do you decide which is the right social media platform for your organization or platforms for your organization?
So kind of two main things I would look at is uh, your capacity and abilities, and then where your key audience, where your primary audience targets are. So I'll start with the second one. You need to know who it is that you really want to be talking to. So if it is like younger kids and talking to them about bullying and stopping bullying or something like that, or being kind to others, well, then I wouldn't necessarily take a look at Facebook as the first place to go to, just based on the age demographics of the average Facebook user. Uh, that said, Smokey does great on Facebook because it is an older population. A lot of people know Smokey from when he was still a bear that was at the Washington, D.C., the National Zoo. They may have visited in that age range of folks, and he's a 75-year-old, the longest running public service campaign in history. But if I'm going in that younger age range, then I definitely feel like you'd need to consider TikTok in some way. But that then would be a little difficult for most organizations to do if they don't have that internal capacity, the resources, the knowledge internally to service that platform. Then you have to question, going back to the mission, if you're really trying to connect with young kids and kind of help them around bullying, well, then why are there not young voices or young employees associated with the organization who natively would understand a TikTok and what that is and what that platform is and how it functions? So then you'd need to potentially find other resources to help you, other agencies or other influencers to help you kind of onboard into that platform. So really it's a combination of those two things as a starting point, like who it is that you really want to communicate that message to, where do they at mostly, and then what do you have the internal capabilities to, and if you don't have those capabilities internally, then how do you leverage outside sources for help as well?
And I think this actually goes back to what you had said earlier, where if you're in a situation where you have individuals that captured the Selena Gomez example, where you've now got a younger population that is following or interested in the organization because of the tweet that came from Selena Gomez, how do you maybe leverage some of them to help with some of these social media outlets that they actually understand and can work through very, very quickly and kind of help your organizations? They may not have the money, but they've got the expertise or the understanding of some of these social media outlets that you can kind of pull into your organization, incorporate them into your volunteer pool.
That's the thing, that maybe you're not asking these younger people to be donors. Maybe this is your pool, that you look at them as like part of your earned media strategy, that you're really reaching out to these kids in this case who have that bandwidth to, sure, I know how to make a TikTok, or I know how to make an Instagram post, or I could do that really easily and be casual about it, or story something in a very casual way and give a shout out to you all. That has value. And that would go back to you kind of calculating what is that value of each of these things that are happening, because not every single person in your database is going to be a money donor, but they could be a donor in another regard and providing value to your organization. So like that's something we're working with now with an organization called Parents Anonymous, where they actually provide the longest running kind of parent and family, youth and children advocacy organization in the country, where they're providing, especially in times of COVID right now, these kinds of groups for people to talk virtually like this, to talk through any kind of stress or issues that they might be having in their families. But we're leaning into an approach of like kind of working with some of those while maintaining anonymity, because there are every set pool of folks that you have as constituents, there might be some certain constraints. With this group, there needs to be a degree of anonymity about who they are and what they're doing. And like a health organization that we work with has HIPAA requirements. So you have to be cognizant of all those things as well in terms of how you're crafting stories. But we're at a point where we're starting to get our story together as to how we want to work with some of the people that they are working with that are part of these groups, so that we can involve them in the telling of the story of the organization, in the kind of telling of the story of themselves and what their evolution has been with the organization, so that then we might be able to rope in more people. And that would be across platforms that the organization itself isn't able to maintain, but it's more so trying to inspire these other folks to say, use whatever platform you have clout on and use that as your means to talk about your experience with us. And so then it's a much more distributed kind of marketing plan versus like putting out a PSA on TV where it's just like a blitzkrieg. This is more like all bubbling up from lots of different sources and everything. So it feels more organic, a little more authentic, and it gives that personal connection in a way of talking about, this is how I personally experienced this nonprofit, Parents Anonymous in this case.
So, I mean, you've been talking a lot about marketing and building all of this groundswell, in essence, surrounding marketing. How does an organization now take what they've been able to create from a marketing perspective, with the videos or the social media and stuff, and how do you now monetize it? How do you now convert it into some sort of fundraising activity? Because again, because of COVID, a lot of organizations have had to scrap some of their major fundraising events. So fundraising is down, or at least the event component of it is down for a lot of organizations. So how do I get my return on investment? How do I monetize some of this stuff?
So we've still, we had our own mix of experiences with clients, ones that they had a gala and we were supposed to be working that gala and then it got canceled. But then we've had some other ones where they leaned into this whole kind of Zoom world of things and they did more of a virtual kind of event. And we're in the midst of planning one now for that Christian Health Center. They're launching this building. And so we're planning a full-on event that's going to be for that, a live stream of it that has a fundraising call to action in it, inside of it. And then we've also done events virtually at the beginning of this year as well. The main thing is like looking at, as you're capturing all of this, what is this larger meta story that you could tell about the organization? How can you use this content beyond just that social post? And so part of that is kind of looking at keeping track of the assets that you have been collecting along the way, and then seeing, well, what else can we do with this? So in the case of a couple of organizations, they are just having the content as a repository on their website. So, and then adding a little bit of a blog post around it so that there's residual effect from having captured that. In other cases, they're trying to wrap it up and like productize it in a way to sell. And in other cases, they're using it just as like kind of a call to action and inspiring people and asking people to make donations just off of a social media post. But largely, we've had some success with these kinds of with producing virtual events that have been fundraising efforts. Yeah, you're not going to be able to put on a gown and have the splashy dinner and what have you, but we've seen success, but it does require a lot more upfront work in producing that, really kind of priming the pumps with some of those donors who are very tight with you so that you can kind of start it off with a bang. So it looks like, okay, look at this. They already were able to raise this money from this kind of virtual thing. And it has a feeling of a groundswell effect, but just kind of going into it and just going in kind of, hey, we're just trying to raise money during this thing. It's a little more difficult to do it. And then I even had seen something that was interesting with my nephews. They were doing something with LLS this past year. And that was a very video-driven campaign, but they were the ones producing the video. They were the ones sharing it with their friends on social media to fundraise. And it really, you couldn't even necessarily immediately tell who the organization was. It was all about what they had wanted to do to help these kids that they had met along the way. So again, really trying to look at ways for authenticity to come across where it doesn't have to always be the organization pushing it out.
Do you see the importance that if you are putting out a little vignette video or something like that, to add a donate button at the end, or connectivity to be able to donate at the end of one of these? Or do you want to kind of keep it more pure in terms of, this is my marketing outreach and then I'm going to do something else from a fundraising perspective?
Yeah, I don't think every video needs to have this donation appeal associated with it. Not every post you put on Facebook has to have like a nonprofit donation button associated to it either. I think you do want to really take a full editorial calendar approach to who you are, looking at your campaigns as a whole, so that how are you having, what are going to be your big tentpole kind of fundraising times? What are your big tentpole marketing times? How do they integrate? Are they separate from each other? And then how do you weave in kind of opportunistic asks along the way as you need them, so that when you are saying this is an urgent need, it does feel like an urgent need and not, well, this place is always asking me for money. So that it really, again, it feels true to the degree of the need that you have. So I don't think that every video or everything needs some kind of pathway to donation. I think you need to put it in place. I think you need to make sure that you have that funnel set up, so if somebody does want to go there, and especially if you are running like a donation focused campaign, I do think you want to make sure you're able to segment that audience and tailor those messages to them, tailor your posts, tailor your ads to them specifically, have those different funnels that come into different landing pages on your site that would speak to somebody specifically in the segment of the audience, so that it's not like this one size fits all ask, really.
Yeah, and again, I agree. And I think if you look at some of the venues or avenues, every organization is going to have something that happens within the year or is going to be happening within a year that lends itself well to that donation campaign. I mean, Guide Dog, a few years back, they had a situation where it was George Bush's dog. When George Bush passed away, they had gotten, the dog was delivered to Guide Dog, and Guide Dog used that as a platform to really push their name out there and push out fundraising activity and everything else. So, there are going to be little points in time where something happens, or where you've got, access to a really good story. And I think I agree. I think, you can build up and get the messaging out there, and then, understand when those stories are going to happen during the course of the year, and kind of tap into those stories in connection with your campaign, so that you end up in a good fundraising spot.
Yeah, I mean, you can't turn every single like Memorial Week into a campaign. Otherwise you'll fatigue your audience, really. So that's why we try to look at punctuated times, so it's not overwhelming the audience with a constant ask. And then also looking for like kind of providing lots of different ways for people to donate. Really, we worked in the past with Animal League America, and they have, if there's a way that you can donate something, they've thought of it. Really, they have everything from kind of almost kind of sponsoring virtual pets in a way, but these are animals, where you're not necessarily doing that. Like, you're not necessarily only sponsoring Charlie, but the story of Charlie that is the bit that ropes you in. But then they have memorials and birthdays. They have direct donations, monthly donations, Facebook campaigns, P2P fundraising, productized fundraising, swag that you can buy. It really, I'd say anybody wants to see kind of like as a benchmark of where you could evolve to, I think they're a good kind of place to go through if you look at the ways to give to that organization. So that then you don't always have to be saying, give us money, because if any post that you have could eventually be some of that tease that leads them back to that site. And then the site itself has all of these pathways to donate in a very simplified way, depending on what it is, where your priorities are as a donor, even.
I'm going to throw out a couple questions from the audience. So someone asked, one hurdle my organization has faced is engagement. We have circulated consistent content, but are still struggling to see interaction on our pages. How do you recommend organizations boost engagement on their content and grow their overall followers? So
we haven't talked about it, but unfortunately, it's the name of the game now with social. It is free in theory, but a lot of it is there is a paid component. So whether it's using your donated ads on from Google, if you have a Google grant, or carving out a paid media budget, like with that LA Christian Health Center, we started with them where they were giving us like literally $100 a month to a portion to different Facebook posts to boost them based on what was happening organically that worked. Then, because of money that came in off of that, it went to 150, then 250. Then it's like, you could take incremental steps based on results that you're getting, but a paid having a paid budget really for social does make a difference. Like for another client now, Dream Flights, we've been there's a big campaign that they have coming up in September timeframe where they are flying the remaining surviving World War II veterans in a biplane that was like a World War II era biplane as like a dream flight of the life, an experience of a lifetime. To this point, we've been focused on just putting out content. Like literally, we have video that's kind of like GoPro stuff on the planes that they fly, just so you get that experience and the feeling of it. But that's now going to be pivoting into fundraising asks as well. But we've been building up a base audience, some of that organically, but then some of that also making paid investments to build everything from followers on their social channels to boosting posts opportunistically based on when we're seeing that it's working, when that post is working organically, and that works. But I know not everybody has that kind of budget to do that, but that's when I would say take a look back at your budget and look at how you might be spreading yourself too thin on some of these social platforms so that you can carve out a paid budget component, because it does help. And then the other way, if you really have no budget in that regard, then it's a matter of kind of leaning into partnerships, ambassadors that might have some sphere of influence that they are willing to just loan it out to you. But even then, ambassadors or influencers are usually want to get paid for their time or paid for what their post is. And that shouldn't be a surprise. But if they have a connection to you, you might be able to lean into that more. But then partnerships with other NGOs, other organizations that are within your sphere or outside of it, where you might be able to organize an exchange, it can take a while. So it's more of an investment of your time to orchestrate those, but those can also be impactful as well.
What are some of the simple, specific steps an outreach nonprofit with, simple, specific steps an outreach nonprofit with a great legacy can do to get started online in an impactful way? What will benefit them in the long run as they learn the ropes and find their voice in the digital social space?
First off, I'd start off with figuring that you had your whole strategy down and everything, but mainly I'd look at what does your website look like first off. So that is going to be the hub for all communications, because any of these things on social or what have you, or email, you're going to really funnel them back to your site. So make sure it doesn't have to be this huge, deep, dense thing, but you got to make sure that your main priorities, if in the case of Animal League America, that's they want people to adopt, donate, and get involved. So those things scream out at you. Figure out, does your site scream the things that you want people to do? Then I'd look at also another owned channel would be email, look at making sure that you can start an email marketing program. That should be a big priority before you even get into like social media or what have you. Then when you start looking at spheres outside of your site and email, then I would start looking at some social channels. And again, I would look at what do you have the capacity to support internally or with some help from outside? And then where is your audience at? And you don't have to be on every single channel at once. Smokey Bear is on every single channel out there. He's been on some kind of private social forums as well as public ones. But whenever there is a new social platform out there, he's been on it just to have a backlink going to his site even. He's not present and actively involved on every one of those channels. So again, I'd say pick and choose based off of what you have the capacity to support, and then really go in deep on that one channel. If you really only have the bandwidth for one, that's fine. Then pick the one, and that doesn't have to be Facebook, because everybody's there. Maybe that's just Twitter, because there's a bunch of data scientists on Twitter, and we support kind of research in a particular nonprofit sector. So really find that one place that you could do, and then like you can continue to evolve doing that, because then if you are on that social channel, you need to feed it content. So then what could that content be? That could be short form, like tweet length text. And then the next evolution might be some pictures or infographics. And then you hire a photographer, then you hire a videographer, and then you're doing that. Then you're running live events. So I would take it in incremental steps based on what you have a full capacity and bandwidth to do, and really being honest with yourself about what your capacity to do. Not just that you have the interest, not just because some CEO came in and said, why aren't we doing Instagrams lives or whatever? But really looking at, well, because we have no staff, or I have no volunteers, or I have no interns, or I have no bandwidth or budget to invest in really getting this stuff seen. because you don't want to just put the stuff out there and have nobody look at it either. So.
Right. It's amazing how quickly 45 minutes go, but we're pretty much out of time. So Michael, I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today. If a nonprofit wanted to reach you, how would they go about doing it?
HelpGood.com. They could go there, or they could get me directly at Michael, Michael at HelpGood.com.
Thanks a lot, Michael. I really appreciate your time. Hey, everybody. In June, we're going to have our annual half-day nonprofit conference. We look forward to seeing you there. Go to our website, www.cerinicpa.com, to register. Until then, stay safe, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. Take care.